Russia has launched overnight airstrikes on Kyiv that Ukrainian officials are describing as exceptionally intense. The head of Kyiv's military administration says Russia used drones, cruise missiles and probably also ballistic missiles in the attacks. Ukraine's chief commander said all Russian missiles were destroyed in Kyiv's airspace. Russia has mounted a flurry of airstrikes on Ukraine in recent days. For more, let's bring in DW Correspondent Nick Connolly in the Ukrainian capital. Nick, it was another difficult night in Kyiv. How did you experience it?
I woke up with a start about 3 in the morning local time, and it was extraordinarily loud for about 10-15 minutes. This was a lot more compact than normal, where you have an explosion and then a little gap, and then people kind of get back to sleep and then get woken up again. This was all in a very short space of time. It really felt like there were floodlights outside my window, even though the curtains were closed. It was basically bright from all those explosions, all those anti-missile systems working at the similar time. It sounded like glass was breaking around me. That was basically bits of debris falling to the ground, and the windows were shaking. So this was definitely very, very intense. And I think the most important development here is that this all was coordinated, seemingly from the Russian side, to all happen within a very short space of time. The authorities here in Kyiv saying that this was the most intense attack on the capital since the beginning of the war. But miraculously, no seemingly damage to human life. Yes, some cars damaged by bits of debris, some local fires, but no significant damage by Kyiv's population. So that definitely is something that's very cheering for the people in charge of that defense system here.
Yeah, and these people are saying they shot all these missiles down. What role are the Western air defense systems playing here?
I think they're crucial, especially when it comes to dealing with ballistic targets. Up till pretty recently, Ukraine had nothing to intercept Russia's ballistic missiles with, especially those hypersonic Kinzhals. That has now changed. We've had confirmed reports of a hypersonic Kinzhal missile shot down by the Patriot, American Patriot missile system, just a few weeks ago, and seemingly that happened again last night. Also, some new deliveries coming in recent days from France and Italy. Similarly, a system that helps to deal with ballistic targets. So it really seems like Ukraine is already, at least for Kyiv and kind of high-profile targets like the capital, in a position to deal with these Russian attacks. And we had President Zelensky in Western European capitals recently asking for more and getting promises and commitments to more deliveries. So there's a real sense that Russia is throwing everything it has at Ukraine, and it's just not working, especially for these targets a bit further away from the front lines. And you get a sense of kind of increasing desperation there, that even things like the Kinzhal, the one kind of big new bit of kit that Russia has, that was the hope that would get past all the Western-supplied equipment, that just isn't working. And on the contrary, it's Russia that's vulnerable. All these Ukrainian drones in recent days getting past Russia's air defenses. So I think there's increasingly desperation on the Russian side, especially since things aren't going very well for them on the battlefield.
DW's Nick Connolly in Kyiv. Thank you very much. And meanwhile, Ukraine's military says it's making progress in the battle for the eastern town of Bakhmut. Fighting has been raging in that town for months. Ukrainian forces say they are now pushing Russian troops back on the northern and southern outskirts. But inside Bakhmut, Ukraine's foothold keeps getting slimmer.
Ukrainian troops are paying a high price for their efforts to liberate the flashpoint city of Bakhmut. This soldier took a direct hit from a mortar shell. He says his helmet saved his life. On Monday, the troops' top commander said they'd made their first significant advances, despite having fewer resources and personnel than their enemies. Russia's defense ministry acknowledged Ukraine's attempts to capture territory around Bakhmut, but denied they had been successful.
To the north and south, the enemy made major attempts to break through our troops' defenses. We repelled all attacks by units of Ukraine's armed forces. No breakthroughs in our defenses occurred.
Bakhmut is the scene of the longest and fiercest fighting of the war. Controlling it is strategic for both sides. Moscow sees Bakhmut as a stepping stone to attacking other cities. Kyiv says keeping up its defence is buying time for its military to prepare for a major counter-offensive to retake Russian-occupied territory. At the forefront of Russia's Bakhmut offensive is the private Wagner army. It suffered major losses, and its leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has persistently accused Moscow of failing to properly supply his army with ammunition. Now a new scandal is brewing. On Monday, the Washington Post claimed that, back in January, Prigozhin offered to betray Russian troop positions to Ukrainian intelligence in return for Ukraine pulling back its troops in Bakhmut. The Post cited a US intelligence leak and added that Prigozhin's offer had been rebuffed by Ukraine, which did not trust him. Prigozhin has dismissed the allegations as nonsense. He denies talking to any Ukrainian intelligence officials. And Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has also called the reports a hoax. The infighting on the Russian side is intense, but whatever the truth, it seems neither Russia nor Ukraine can afford to concede Bakhmut. And so the brutal fight for the city continues.
Joining me now for more on this is Dr. Marina Miron. She's a military analyst and a research fellow at the Defence Studies Department from King's College, London. Dr. Miron, what do you make of the situation in Bakhmut right now?
Good morning. Well, the situation is very difficult, despite the fact that the Ukrainian troops have made some advances in the past days, as we have heard, which was a big surprise. We have seen Yevgeny Prigozhin coming out and complaining again and criticizing the Russian airborne forces and saying that only Wagner is responsible for any advances in Bakhmut. And as of this morning, there are reports that Wagner has surrounded the so-called nest and is going forward and is trying to take the last bits. Yesterday, Wagner chief claimed that they moved 150 meters closer to the Ukrainian forces. However, the situation remains difficult. It is unclear which side is going to gain the upper hand.
Now, the city clearly is in ruins. Why are the two sides both so determined to hold on to it?
Well, there are military logic and also kind of the political logic behind holding on to Bakhmut for the Ukrainian armed forces. Militarily, the Russians, they've been trying to take Bakhmut for 11 months now in order to use it as a launch pad to move further to Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, and also to complicate the logistics for the Ukrainian armed forces to prevent supply of troops, as well as to collapse the Ukrainian defense lines. And also the city has become symbolic both for Russia and for Ukraine, for President Zelensky, because despite a lot of kind of criticism and questioning, he decided to leave the troops in Bakhmut, not to withdraw them, in order to show that this was this influx of the aid from Western countries and the lack of progress from the Ukrainian side in recent months, that the Ukrainian armed forces still have that capability. So it is sort of symbolic for Ukraine to show that they have the capability to hold on and then perhaps to move to a counteroffensive.
Now, as we heard, there are reports of Mr. Prigozhin, that's the head of the Wagner group, allegedly offering to betray Russian troop positions to Ukrainian intelligence. How will this leak play out within the Russian military? Briefly, if you can.
Well, I'm not sure whether Prigozhin is indeed meaning to betray the Russian side, despite his dissatisfaction and despite the rift existing between Prigozhin specifically and the Ministry of Defense. Prigozhin is still close to Putin, and he's close to the GRU. So it is more maybe of a hoax than a real kind of threat to betray Russian positions, because we have seen a lot of controversial statements coming from Prigozhin, such as his threat to withdraw from Bakhmut, and then he decided to stay after all. So I don't think we should be taking this seriously. That being said, the morale of the Russian troops is certainly being affected with new deliveries to Ukrainian side and just general war exhaustion, and the fact that the Russians, especially the newly mobilized, don't know when this is going to end. So from that perspective, it is still difficult for the Russians and for their morale.
The defense analyst, Dr. Marina Miron, King's College, London, thank you very much.
Thank you.